Hey, it's Kara, your host. I'm here today because I'm often asked, what should I read next? Or what is your all time favorite book? And that is why I created this list. This list isn't a declaration of the greatest books of all time. Rather, it's a collection of the stories I can't stop thinking about, the ones I've recommended more times than I can count, and that continue to live rent-free in my head. Whether you're looking for your next unforgettable read, or just want to see what books have shaped my reading life, I hope this guide of 25 books inspires you to discover a new favorite. Head on over to the link in the show notes or to bookishflights.com/read/25 books. Hi, I'm Kara Infante, and this is Bookish Flights. In each episode, I chat with one bookish guest as we take some time to sample and savor the pairing recommendations from their bookish flight. We hope to give you suggestions to cultivate your TBR list and nurture your leisure time through books. In today's episode, I am chatting with Janet Skeslien Charles. Janet is the New York Times, USA Today, and #1 international best-selling author of The Paris Library, Moonlight in Odessa, Miss Morgan's Book Brigade, and latest, the audiobook Parisian Chapter. Janet was born and raised in Montana. After graduating from the University of Montana, she got a job teaching English in Ukraine. She later went to France intending to teach for a year and has been there ever since. Place is at the heart of every story she has ever written. She loves traveling, spending time with friends and family, and researching stories of forgotten people and places. Welcome to the show, Janet.
For having me.
You are so welcome. Well, what an interesting bio. And I can see where you go to teach for a year and it just sucks you right in. So tell us about living in France.
You're on a program that started in 1905 and still exists today for people who are aged 20 to 35. And you can apply through the French government to work here for a school year.
Okay.
And so that's when I did. I think I was about 28 years old. And so I applied. And I was nervous about living in Paris. They give you 3 options of the regions in France you might want to live. So I chose Alsace-Lorraine, and I ended up in a city called Mulhouse for a year. And I worked in a local high school, and I really enjoyed it. I lived 30 minutes from maybe the Swiss border and from the German border.
Okay.
So it felt kind of international, and I really just enjoyed my time there. And then I met my husband, so I kept renewing my contract at work, and then I got married, and that's a long-term contract.
Yeah.
And so that's how I've been here. But it's originally through that program where people can come and teach English for a year.
Yeah. So, okay, so you come teach English. Did you know a lot of French when you went?
Because I grew up in Shelby, Montana, population 2,000, but on my same street, 3 blocks down the street, there was a war bride named Claudine. And I didn't know her very well, but I just loved how she spoke English. She made English sound so much better than anyone else when she spoke with that beautiful French accent.
Yeah.
And so that's really kind of like that first prickling of interest. She was really one of the only foreign people I'd ever met, and she was just kind of represented the outside world. And so in high school, in Montana, in my small town at the time, we just had 2 years of French. So I took 2 years of French, and then I came here for a month and just lived with a host family.
Yeah.
And my parents also had French students stay for a month in the summer. So that kind of really helped to help my French to have those exchanges.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Because I will say, I am from a small town and we only had Spanish as a language. We didn't even have any other language option. So I'm like, if I was faced with that, we would not have French available.
Well, we only had, I mean, we had French, and it was, we didn't have 4 years of French. We had
Sure.
2 years of French.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Which is very introductory in high school, right? Like to go live, I lived in Rome and Sicily. So I've kind of done this in the opposite without very little Italian because I had only taken Spanish. And it really doesn't get you very far with 2 years, even 4 years of high school Spanish, but it just doesn't take you very far, I think.
I think David Sedaris talks about the immersive method of learning where you dive into the language pool and it's sink or swim.
Yeah.
And I think that's true. And especially if you live in a place like I did when I stayed in France where no one spoke English,
Yeah.
I carried around a little dictionary with me. And now it's a little easier because you can have Google Translate. And so it doesn't feel so hard. But it's true that it does take a while.
Yeah, I studied abroad before smartphones when I lived in Rome, and then when we moved back, my husband's in the military, so we moved back to a base. There's a base in Sicily, and it was in like 2017. So we had smartphones. I was like, wow, this is a world of difference. Like I can navigate without having to ask for directions in another language. That alone was huge. I was like, oh, I can go anywhere. Like I have Google Maps. But very different experience. So I totally understand what you're saying there. So, okay, so you had started as a teacher. When did you switch over to writing, or had you always been a writer?
I've always been a writer. I've always been journaling and writing letters, and I just love the feel of a pen in my hand and just writing on paper. That's just what makes me happiest. And so I went to Odessa, Ukraine in 1994, and I stayed there for 2 years. And I thought about the story I wanted to write for about 10 years. And then my book about Odessa, Ukraine came out in 2009, and it sold in the US and UK, and then I think 12 other languages.
Wow.
And it was about email order brides. And so that's really how I got my start, but it did take 10 years of thinking about that story and what that time meant to me. So I'm not really a fast writer.
Yeah. Were you even putting pen to paper at that point, or you were marinating on the story for 10 years?
I was thinking a lot about it and writing about those experiences. And
Sure.
then I was on a train and thinking about my main character. And then that's really when the story took off. But it was a lot of thinking about it first. And once I put pen to paper with that main character, it took about 2 years.
Yeah. Do you still write that way?
I prefer pen and paper because I find that if I get frustrated with a Word document, I'll just delete it. And then
Ah.
the next day I'll think, oh, that wasn't so bad, but it's
Yeah.
already gone. It's like I just delete everything. I delete there's nothing even to be found in the garbage. It's gone.
Yeah.
Whereas pen, you'd really have to have a Sharpie and really be intent on, blackening out the whole thing.
Yeah, you'd have to have some strong feelings about that passage to be taking that out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then, so do you also kind of marinate on the story for a long time, or do you get to writing faster now that you've written a few more books?
I think I still marinate quite a lot. And so there are periods where I'll journal, but not necessarily work on the book. It's just maybe the background story or background ideas.
Yeah. And I imagine for your books as well, you're researching a lot too and digging into the history and these stories as well of these forgotten places or people, as your bio said.
Yes, well, and my novel, Miss Morgan's Book Brigade, was based on the real life story of Jessie Kit Carson, who brought the concept of children's libraries to northern France, 90% of which had been completely destroyed. And so trying to find her was very difficult because when she came here, she was 42 years old in 1918. She was single, which was really rare at the time. People obviously got married much younger, and staying single was not so much an option back then. And so people like Anne Morgan and some of the richer women who volunteered for the American Committee for Devastated France, they wrote autobiographies that were published, or their families were very wealthy. And so there are archives in museums or in at universities. But for Jessie Carson, the only thing I have of hers was from a fellow card enthusiast who sent me a PDF of a letter she'd written, that Jessie Carson had written. Her name is Gail Baden, and she kindly shared that with me, but she bought it on eBay.
Wow.
And it's a handwritten letter that Jessie Carson wrote to her mother. And so I have reports written by Jessie Carson, photos, but something that was handwritten and more personal, it's just one item. And so to construct a narrative around um, someone that we don't know very well takes a lot of time.
Yeah. Well, I love that piece because I've read that book and now I see the twist where maybe you were in some of that in the present day character, right? Because this was you researching this story.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I really wanted to show the reader the highs and lows of research and even something simple like a woman getting married at that time. For example, I was looking for the Paris Library, the book that was published in 2021. There was a Jewish librarian from Chicago who worked at the American Library in Paris, and she disappeared during the war, and we didn't know what happened to her. And I found out after the book was published that because, we thought maybe she was arrested, maybe she perished, and she did disappear, but it was in a different way. She got married. So she went from being Jeanette Ettlinger to Mrs. Herbert E. King.
Wow.
And so it's so easy for women to disappear once they get married
Yeah.
because in many cultures there's no trace of that maiden name. And so it was kind of the same with some of the women that were volunteers in World War One. Once they got married, it was harder to find them again. So I just wanted to show kind of those ups and downs and that wild goose chase and the highs that you feel once you find a character that's been lost to history.
Yeah, that I loved that part of the book with the tie-in and that like dual timeline. And now it like makes it even more special knowing that this is like a true what truly happens when you are researching
Yes,
a book.
yes.
Well, you have your latest novel that has come out, The Parisian Chapter. Can you tell us a bit about it?
I'm really excited about it. It's the third book in my library trilogy, and it's a little bit of romance, a little bit of coming of age, and I think it underlines second chances and facing our fears. And for me, the most exciting part about it is that all the characters survive. And this is huge for me because I've written two historical fiction books set in world wars in France. And unfortunately, in real life, the characters did die. So I had to write about that. And it's never fun to kill characters off, especially if they're based on real people. So it was really a thrill just to start the book with everyone and finish the book with everyone in a good place. That just meant a lot to me as an author.
Yeah. Is I imagine too when you spend time with these characters and you're writing them and you're trying to think from their viewpoint and their perspective, I imagine you do get some emotional investment in these characters.
Yes. Well, it's true. Most of the emails I get are from readers who want to know what happened to the real life character Jessie Kit Carson after the war. So it really makes me happy to receive those emails that people are interested to find out what she did after the war and if she's was fine and was doing okay. So yes, that means a lot.
Yeah. So for the Parisian chapter, this is going to be a multicast audiobook as well, which sounds really fun.
I'm so excited about it. I worked at the American Library in Paris as programs manager, and this book is actually a companion book to Miss Morgan's book Brigade and the Paris Library, in that there are characters who have cameos. And so in the Parisian chapter, we have Lily, who is from the Paris Library, who gets a job as the programs manager at the American Library in Paris.
Okay.
And it's an interesting place because you have people from all walks of life. You have poor students, you have very wealthy trustees, you have everyone in between who come and go. And so just to I wanted to really show what an institution like that is like and how much it means to each of us. And so it was really fun for me to write from all of these different points of view, from the kind of disgruntled head librarian to the collection manager who loves his job and loves the library, and to the volunteers, to the director who just struggles every single day to keep the place alive. It was really fun to take that on.
Yeah. So now us as readers are going to get like kind of this behind the scenes look at how a library is run and all the different positions it sounds like. That sounds exciting.
It really was a fun book too. I think it was probably my favorite book to write.
Yeah. That was one thing that kind of left me aghast from Miss Morgan's Book Brigade was how I forget he was one of the gentlemen related to the like background of the library, and he was like, well, books should be for different classes of people. And I was like, people think like that? Like I had this moment of like I'm can see they probably did, but I was just like aghast. I was like, what?
Yes, and that character was based on the head librarian of a very famous Parisian library, a university library here. And so, yes, that is one thing that Jesse Carson brought to France was this idea that libraries were for everyone, that you didn't have to wait behind a railing while the librarian got you the book because
Yeah.
there were no open stacks at the time, that anyone could have access to a book. She worked with rural folks, just like I grew up in a rural environment, and so I think it meant the world to everyone that she helped. That she brought this idea of free reading, free access. Books for children. She brought furniture for children so that they could sit and enjoy books. Because I think in a lot of places there was that idea of children should be seen but not heard. And so for children to enjoy books, to have those special tables and chairs that were made just for them, I think these are things that we take for granted now, but it was really revolutionary at that time here in northern France.
Wow. That gives me so much to think about on that piece of it. Well, what have you learned about yourself through writing?
I think that I really loved the research and that I could happily just spend my days in a dusty archive and just looking at people's lives. I find people absolutely fascinating. And for the Miss Morgan's Book Brigade, there were 350 volunteers. And of course, I couldn't feature them all,
Yeah.
but I spent so much time researching, dozens and dozens of them. And just that's, I think, what I learned was just that interest in other people and just my happiness at just sitting in that room and looking at their photos and trying to figure out their lives from just the scant information that we might have of
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, well, and I think we've talked about this on the show before. It makes history so accessible. I really wish I would have learned history this way in school, right? When it's told through a story, I feel like it helps put it in context and I can understand so much more. And you kind of put yourself in the shoes of the character. And it's such a great way for us to understand history. And that's why historical fiction is like my go-to genre because I'm learning
Oh,
while reading an enjoyable story at the same time. So I love it for that reason.
well, it's really crazy to me that the Parisian chapter could be considered historical fiction. It's set in 1995, which doesn't seem that long ago, but we lived in such a different way before the internet really took off. And I think there definitely is that before and after. And just like you were saying, when there was a time when you would just have a guide and a dictionary and you kind of were very limited with the knowledge, and now we're armed with so much knowledge. It's
Yeah.
really incredible.
Yeah, I know you had mentioned that these are all part of a trilogy. Do you suggest they're read in order, or you had said the characters just more make cameos in the other novels? Like, what would you suggest for the reader?
They're definitely standalone books, but
Okay.
I think whatever strikes your fancy is the best way to do it.
Okay.
But yes, I hope that people will enjoy the books and enjoy learning a little bit more about the librarians and the American Library in Paris, and just the people who love that institution.
Yeah. Wonderful. One of my questions usually is like, what is your wish for the reader when they pick up your books? But I feel like that you just kind of answered that for me. So thank you.
Oh.
So was there a book that you read that made you want to become a writer?
About that question about what I hope the reader pondered.
Yeah.
I think it's that you don't have to be rich or famous to make an impact, that you can help other people with your knowledge. And I think that's with the Paris Library and Miss Morgan's Book Brigade, these American women who came to France during World Wars. And in the case of the Paris Library, hand delivering books to Jewish readers, or in the case of Jessie Kit Carson, bringing books to the war zone to help these people, these women and children who'd been enslaved by the German occupying force in World War I. These were librarians who didn't have a lot of money, who were not married, who did not have an extensive social circle or rich relatives, and they created community and did so much with so little, just with their own enthusiasm and heart. And so I think that's definitely what I would want the reader to take away, is that you don't have to be a millionaire to make an impact in your own community.
Yeah, that's such a great reminder for us all, right? And I always think about like my circle of influence as being like my little family, right? Like the only thing I can really influence is my own children. I can't influence Joey down the street. Like I can only influence my family. And I think it was Mother Teresa that said, like, if you want to change the world, go home and love your family. And so I always like think when the days are so busy with like my own children, and it's beautiful, but it's hard. I'm like, this is where I'm meant to be though, in this moment, right? And I think that like to your point of like it might be really small, but it can be a ripple effect down the line that you may never see or know.
Well, I think that's exactly right. And I think with your podcast, you're planting seeds, and maybe you won't see them grow because they're spread out throughout the country and the world, but they definitely grow. They
Yeah.
definitely grow. And, fostering this love of reading and sharing the recommendations you might have and giving authors a voice, that's so huge.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I love it. Well, let's switch gears a little bit. I'd love to hear who you are as a reader. What genres do you enjoy reading?
Read everything. I don't really have a genre. And when I'm writing a book, I try not to read similar books
Sure.
just because I don't want to be influenced. So, for when I was writing about Paris and historical fiction, I didn't read anything about Paris or historical fiction. I read a lot of crime novels
Yeah.
that were set anywhere but Paris. So I think that's a way to just kind of focus on other things. And I love crime novels because they show you so much about how to construct a novel, because they're just, they have such momentum and such stakes. So that's when I'm really working on my novels, I need something completely different. So I might read crime novels, I might read some nonfiction. I love reading people's memoirs. I love reading about how people get through things. So those are kind of the things I'm reading when I'm not working.
Yeah. Yeah. Memoirs are such a great, I feel like a hidden gem, right? It's like you get
Yeah.
these
Yes.
stories and like you said, and their perspective and how they got through it all. And you're like, wow, this is amazing. How did you do that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love them. Well, how in your busyness do you find time to read?
A lot of advanced reader copies. And so I really, like, I'll just give you the example of Fiona Davis and Krista Harmel and so many authors who I did not know personally who blurbed my work, or Jake Lamar, who I did know, who kindly blurbed my first novel. So I want to give back to the
Yeah.
maybe I can't give back to the people. I do read their work, but I also want to endorse people's work. So I love receiving advanced reader copies. I love, and of course, with an advanced reader copy, you also have a deadline
Yeah.
because they're going to eventually print the book. So that actually really helps me to have that little deadline, because sometimes I can put down a book and then pick up another book and then another
Yes.
book and another book, because I sometimes read like 4 or 5 books at the same time. So I really enjoy receiving advanced reader copies and reading authors' work. That just gives me such pleasure.
Yeah.
And knowing that I think there are fewer spaces in newspapers for reviews. So my book wasn't widely reviewed, but the authors who took the time to read an endorsement and endorse it, that really meant the world to me. And so that's why I read so many arcs, because I want to give that pleasure to other authors.
Yeah, and like you said, it's just kind of watering, like that's not just planting the seed, that's kind of like watering the garden a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So, well, you have been so gracious to bring a book flight with you today. Can you tell us how you chose these books?
My most some of my favorite books. And I have to say I mainly read women and I mainly read people who are still alive. So that's kind of my criteria. Those are my
Yeah,
criteria, I guess. Yes.
wonderful.
Yes.
Well, what's the first book you chose today?
I really enjoyed The Ice Cream Queen of Orchard Street by Susan Jane Gilman, and
Okay.
it is a sweeping saga that tells the history of America of the 20th century through the life of one woman and also through the history of ice cream. And it is to devour without moderation. And what's interesting is there's a moment in time where somehow polio was linked to people thought you got polio from eating ice cream.
Wow, I
And
had no
so
idea.
it was just like a little tidbit in that book. It was, because Susan Jane Gilman wrote about the history of America through this book, but it was really interesting to see how, and she wrote it, it was published before COVID, but you see kind of the same distrust of maybe vaccines or maybe the same, not maybe the same distrust of vaccines, but where you don't know where things come from. Or
Yeah.
and being scared of something or not quite knowing what is coming. And so I thought it was so interesting.
Wow. And
And just to look at America through the lens of one person, I thought it was very interesting.
yeah, and I love the title. I love ice cream. So I'm like, this has to go on my list. The moment you told me, I was like, oh, I'm so intrigued. The title alone just draws me right in. I'm like, I have to know more.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting book.
Okay, so that was The Ice Cream Queen of Orchard Street by Susan Jane Gilman. What's the next book you brought today?
I love How the Garcia Girls Lost Their Accent by Julia Alvarez. And I love the content of the book, which is interconnected stories. And it's about a family who moves from the Dominican Republic to New York City in the 1960s. But what I really appreciated about the book was the short story Snow, which I think is about 2 pages long. And it's set in a classroom and it shows how children internalize what is going on around them. And I read this story several times a year, and I often lead creative writing workshops. And this
Okay.
is one of my favorite stories to look at just because it has so many layers to it. And like I said, I read it several times a year, and I always find new things about it to admire. So it's a lot of fun to read.
Yeah. And for an author that can do that, right, where you can go back to it and you can keep going back to it and you still take nuggets away, that's amazing. So that was How the Garcia Girls Lost Their Accent by Julia Alvarez. And what's the last book you brought today?
It's a book called Small Admissions by
Okay.
Amy Pople. And first of all, the title is perfect because of the double meaning of the word admission. One is a statement of knowledge, excuse me, a statement acknowledging the truth of something, and two, the right or permission to enter a place such as a school. And so you have that double entendre, the double meaning of the word, I guess. And I admire how she shows the life of an institution, from the people who work in the admissions office and who are making the decisions about who will be able to attend the school to the parents desperately trying to get their kids into that school. And it really shows that mindset of there's this, this moment in your life where this means everything and the stakes are so high to you and so few people can understand what you're going through. And I really try to do that same thing with my novel, The Parisian Chapter, which shows the inner workings of the American library and how everyone has their own ambitions and their own stakes and their own concerns. And I just really liked Small Admissions for how the author really showed those stakes for the people. I thought it was fascinating and had a lot of heart and humor.
Yeah. As you were talking about, like, there's this moment where you feel like life hinges on this one decision. It's like I almost got that little bit in my throat that you feel of like, well, is it gonna like? I'm like, it's amazing that even you just talking about that, I could kind of feel that emotion of what that means. So
Yes,
not
yes,
that my kids have
exactly.
gone to an admission process, so I haven't been through it, but like everybody's had a moment in their life where you feel like this decision, it will change my life.
Yes, yes, exactly. And so I think it's just captured really well and just kind of the panic or frenzy that we feel in these moments.
Yeah. Is it nonfiction or fiction? I'm sorry, I think I missed that.
It's fiction, but it said in her author bio that she did work in a school and she actually wrote a play about it before she wrote the novel, which I find really interesting as well.
Yeah, well, I haven't heard of this one, so thank you so much for
Mm.
sharing it because I'm very intrigued. So that was Small Admissions by Amy Popel. So how I love to end our show here is with our bonus pairings, which are a speed round of questions that you can answer really quick. Are you a rereader?
I love rereading books and seeing which passages I underlined during a previous reading. And it makes me realize what I valued at different times in my life. There are books that I've reread 3 times and I'll like use maybe different colors at different for
Yeah.
different readings. So I'd be like, oh, blue, that was when I was 20. Oh, green, that was when I was 32. And it really shows you because not, and sometimes I mean, usually I'll underline different things in the same book at different times. So it's really funny what jumps out at you as we get older, because of course the book stays the same and the characters stay the same. It's we've changed.
Yeah, I finish off with a quote at the end of the show about how books come into our life when we most need them, essentially, is like the grand gist of it. Because I think it's so true. And to your point, is that could mean very different things versus 20 versus 32 versus different periods of our life. Like you're like, wow, like, and just how it stands out to you. So I'm not a rereader, but that reason, I'm like, maybe I should do that with different colors and then go back like 10 years later and see if it means something different or if it still means something at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a really fun exercise. I didn't do it on purpose. It was just it just happened to be the color of pen I picked up when was different probably the first time.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Well, what is one book you've read that has changed your life?
I really loved Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. And just speaking of rereading, it's something I read in my early 20s, and I read it as kind of like a Goldilocks love story because
Okay.
the main character had different men in her life, and they were very different to each other. And then in my 30s, I read the book as a story of friendship between two women. And then in my 40s, I read it as a study of time and place. And now I'm in my 50s, and I'm just wondering what I will find when I pick it up again. I'm sure I'll see something different.
Yeah,
And
that's,
I just love, I think that book was a revelation to me because it just showed all the different layers a book could be.
yeah,
So I love it as a reader, but I love it as a writer.
yeah, wonderful. So, and then where is your favorite place to read?
In my parents' sunroom in Shelby, Montana, because you can look up from the book and see the birds, and it's really pretty. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds lovely. Lastly, what are you reading next?
I mentioned I receive a lot of advanced reader copies, and I just started a book called The Bookbinder's Secret by A.D. Bell. And I love books, and I love books about strong women. So this one is perfect for me. What about you? What's next on your list?
Yes, I am actually going to read The Tainted Cup by it's Robert. Hold on. I pulled it up in the background here. Robert Jackson Bennett. And we just picked this one for our book club because people were kind of asking, like, we haven't done a fantasy read in our book club. And I was like, well, give me a moment to do some research because we all know fantasy can be very lengthy and we meet once a month for our book club. So I'm like, we don't want something too long because we want everybody to have time to read it. But it is a fantasy thriller and it's supposed to be an adaptation of like a Sherlock Holmes and Watson style tale. So it's gonna, and I'm really intrigued. Like it's like a reimagining of that in a fantasy book. So I'm super excited. And you made me think of it when you were talking about how you read like crime thrillers.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds really interesting.
So, and I believe it's going to be a trilogy where book two comes out tomorrow. Actually, listeners, we're recording on March 31st. So we're talking in April terms. But there was nothing up there. Book three is there, but it's still untitled and there was no like release date. But I believe it's going to be a trilogy. So I'm very excited for this one.
Yeah. Well, I love when you discover an author and then you discover that they've written several books. It's really exciting to be able to read more.
Yes, that's how I am. I'm like, I'll find one and I'm like, oh, well, what's their backlist? Like, I love it. And then it like opens up a whole new world of like, well, what else could I go and read?
William Kent Kruger for
Yes.
his Minnesota season. And, it would be like 104 degrees. But when you read his books set in Minnesota in the winter, you need to read them with a hot water bottle because his writing makes you so cold, describing that humid, cold winter. So yeah, when I discovered his book, and I think there were like at least 8 in the series at the time, I just was just so happy to have those books to continue to read.
Yeah, I grew up in Chicago actually, so like the Midwest. So anytime I find a book that's set in the Midwest, it just has a special place in my heart because it gives me like that feeling of home. And so that was how I discovered him because it was set. I read The River We Remember, and that one had been set, and I was like, oh, well, and then I like dug into him. I'm like, oh, all his stories are set in the Midwest, so that's definitely one of my like. If I'm at the library, if I notice a new one up, I'm like, oh, grabbing that one. So it's good to have that list when you go to the library of authors that you can, and love, and you can watch for.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Yes.
Oh,
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I know your time is precious, and I appreciate all you've given me.
thank you so much for having me today. I just love talking about books and I love getting your recommendations. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for listening to this episode today with Janet Skeslien Charles, including her book flight featuring some of her favorite women writers that are living. We'd love to hear what other books or writers you love at bookishflights.com. If you enjoyed the show, please head over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review. Your review not only helps the show, but it also helps the podcast to reach others. Make sure you are subscribed on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to make sure you will not miss an episode. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. As Emma Thompson said, I think books are like people in the sense that they'll turn up in your life when you most need them. Cheers to you, dear readers. Until next time.